Modern society constantly rewards you for walking away from uncomfortable situations, aggressively labeling it as emotional maturity. But in the clinical realm of human behavior, avoiding conflict is rarely about protecting your peace. It is almost always a profound biological weakness. Right now, your brain is actively lying to you to mask a primal cowardice that is destroying your social leverage. If you do not recognize the precise cognitive failure I am about to expose in this clinical breakdown, you will permanently surrender your autonomy to the covert manipulators who surround you. The modern wellness industry has convinced you that retreating from friction makes you superior. And today, we are going to meticulously tear down that highly profitable delusion to reveal the uncomfortable psychological truth about your boundaries. For years, mainstream pop psychology has marketed conflict avoidance as the ultimate sign of high-level emotional intelligence. You are instructed to walk away from arguments, simply block the people who challenge your perspective, and retreat into your own highly curated, completely sterile safe space. But when we examine this exact behavior through the unforgiving lens of evolutionary biology and clinical behavioral psychology, chronic avoidance is never a sign of actual strength. It is a primitive trauma response. When you consistently remove yourself from social friction under the disguise of guarding your energy, you are actually surrendering to an avoidant attachment style driven entirely by biological fear. You are actively allowing your amygdala, the brain's primal threat detection center, to completely hijack your rational decision-making process. Every single time you walk away from a mild interpersonal confrontation or silently agree with someone just to keep the peace, your brain releases a tiny, highly addictive hit of dopamine. You feel a momentary sense of relief, but that relief is a toxic psychological manipulation you're playing on yourself to avoid the painful reality of asserting your identity. Listen to me very carefully, because the neuroplastic window to reverse this biological cowardice is closing more rapidly than you can possibly comprehend. Every single day you rely on this fake emotional safety to escape confrontation, your brain permanently prunes the neural pathways required for assertiveness, negotiation, and human resilience. The psychological decay compounds daily. If you look away or close this video right now, you are consciously choosing to remain a voluntary victim of your own nervous system, and the aggressive predators in your immediate circle will use this exact biological blind spot to replace you. You must understand the next phase of this psychological trap today before your submission becomes neurologically permanent. Why does fleeing destroy your nervous system? Let us clinically dissect what is actually happening inside your central nervous system when you decide to flee from an argument. Human beings are biologically hardwired to establish hierarchies through calculated social friction. For millions of years of evolutionary history, the inability to defend your physical or intellectual territory meant guaranteed expulsion from the tribe. Your brain requires unpredictable social conflict to maintain cognitive behavioral resilience in the exact same way your physical muscles require heavy resistance to maintain mass. When you completely remove yourself from unpredictable social dynamics to supposedly protect your peace, you are literally starving your brain of necessary psychological stress. You are creating a sterile emotional environment that destroys your natural psychological immune system. In the fields of clinical depression and complex trauma recovery, this phenomenon is officially classified as maladaptive coping. You genuinely believe you are demonstrating high status by walking away, but your nervous system is actually executing a primitive flight response that drives you into absolute behavioral submission. Because you have successfully eliminated all external conflict from your daily life, your biological baseline for emotional trauma violently drops to absolute zero. This means that eventually even the slightest social inconvenience, a critical email from your boss, a minor disagreement with your partner, or a slightly aggressive tone from a stranger, will trigger a massive cortisol spike and a full-blown physiological panic attack. You have not achieved inner peace. You have simply made your nervous system incredibly fragile. You have mathematically manufactured an artificial psychological vulnerability. This explains the dark irony behind the people who constantly preach about their good vibes only philosophy. They are almost always the most easily triggered, highly reactive, and emotionally unstable people in any given room. Their emotional intelligence is fundamentally stunted because they flatly refuse to participate in the mandatory friction of human relationships. They have confused emotional regulation with emotional cowardice, and that cognitive dissonance is destroying their baseline mental health. Are you setting boundaries or running away? Let us dive deeper into the neurochemistry of this self-inflicted damage and the lie you tell yourself about boundaries. You use therapy buzzwords to justify your inability to stand your ground. You call it a boundary when you ghost a friend who offended you. You call it protecting your energy when you quit a job the moment your manager gives you constructive criticism. But true boundaries require active, highly uncomfortable confrontation. Real boundaries require you to plant your feet, look another human being directly in the eye, and verbally enforce a strict rule of engagement. It requires you to absorb their immediate emotional reaction, whether it is anger, guilt-tripping, or manipulation, and remain completely immovable. Fleeing the scene, blocking a phone number, or quietly fading away into the background is not a boundary. It is an escape hatch for the emotionally weak. By refusing to engage, you strip your brain of its ability to self-soothe in the presence of danger. You become entirely dependent on environmental control to feel safe. You begin to micromanage your social circles, curating your friendships so aggressively that anyone who intellectually challenges your worldview is immediately discarded as toxic. This is not emotional maturity. This is covert narcissism disguised as self-care. You are demanding that the entire world conform to your extreme emotional fragility, and when it inevitably doesn't, you retreat further into your invisible prison. You are constructing a psychological echo chamber where your own confirmation bias becomes your only source of absolute truth, entirely blinding you to your own toxic, avoidant behavioral patterns. You will absolutely never hear this clinical reality from mainstream life coaches or online therapists, because keeping you fragile, agreeable, and constantly seeking validation is the backbone of a $4.4 trillion wellness economy. This is the carefully hidden behavioral architecture that the top 1% of elite communicators use to dominate corporate and social hierarchies, while the masses hide behind screens avoiding real confrontation. If you do not master this exclusive biological reality in the next 2 minutes, you will remain their highly profitable prey forever. You simply cannot afford to miss how manipulators are actively weaponizing your fear of conflict to destroy your reputation right now. How do manipulators exploit your cowardice? Let us examine the incredibly dark psychology of the specific individuals who silently applaud your inability to fight back. Covert narcissists, Machiavellian personalities, and highly skilled manipulators absolutely love it when you decide to avoid conflict at all costs. When you refuse to stand up for yourself, you are doing the predator's job for them. A manipulator's primary tactic is to test the perimeter of your defenses. They will drop a subtle insult, make a passive-aggressive joke, or slightly overstep a professional line just to see what you will do. When your response is to nervous laugh, look away, and completely avoid addressing the disrespect to keep the peace, you hand them the absolute keys to your psychological cage. You mistakenly believe you are taking the high road, but they interpret your silence as an unconditional surrender of your territory. By removing yourself from the friction, you leave a massive power vacuum. Because you are terrified of the discomfort of a direct confrontation, the manipulators in your environment use your sudden withdrawal to rewrite the entire narrative. Because you are not there to aggressively defend your position or engage in the necessary social combat, they easily label you as weak, unreliable, or a pushover. Your absence of resistance becomes their greatest weapon. You thought you were preserving your peace, but you actually surrendered all your social leverage. You abandoned your intellectual territory. And in the primal, unforgiving hierarchy of human behavior, abandoned territory is immediately conquered by the most aggressive predator in the room. They will take your credit, step over your boundaries, and slowly consume your resources because they know with absolute biological certainty that you will never have the courage to stop them. Why does conflict avoidance ruin your reputation? We must also address the devastating, measurable impact this biological cowardice has on your financial and professional trajectory. In high-level corporate environments, business networking, and wealth generation, friction is the absolute currency of progress. High CPM environments, where the stakes are massive, the pressure is crushing, and the financial rewards are life-changing, require leaders who can navigate intense psychological conflict without fracturing. When high-value individuals observe you constantly withdrawing from difficult conversations, avoiding high-stakes negotiations, or yielding to dominant personalities just to avoid an argument, they do not see a person with a peaceful aura. They see a massive biological liability. They quietly categorize you as someone who completely lacks the nervous system regulation required to handle true power. They will smile at you, they will respect your role as a subordinate, but they will never invite you into the rooms where real equity is distributed and true power is consolidated. Your obsession with avoiding conflict is quite literally keeping you poor, invisible, and utterly irrelevant in the grand scheme of the marketplace. You must realize that emotional detachment from conflict is never a superpower if it is primarily driven by subconscious fear. True stoicism and supreme nervous system regulation require you to be fully present in the absolute chaos of an argument, fully exposed to the friction of reality, and yet remain completely composed and immovable. That is true psychological dominance. What you are currently doing is the exact biological opposite. You are fleeing the battlefield before the fight even begins and proudly calling yourself a victor. Over time, this chronic avoidance leads to severe mental health interventions, because the primitive human brain simply cannot differentiate between actual peace and the suppressed terror of a confrontation you ran away from. The biochemical results coursing through your veins are exactly the same: chronically high cortisol levels, severe adrenal fatigue, systemic inflammation, and a devastating collapse of your self-esteem. You become numb to your own identity, mistaking your clinical depression and lack of assertiveness for some form of enlightened inner peace. The mathematical cost of your inaction today is absolute and unforgiving. Your cowardly behavior is actively destroying your social capital, your financial leverage, and your mental resilience at this exact second. Every single confrontation you avoid today creates a compounded psychological debt that you will be forced to pay back with severe anxiety and loss of status tomorrow. You have less than a minute to completely reprogram this cognitive failure before your invisible prison is sealed shut. Your weakness becomes a permanent personality trait, and your respect is entirely erased from the social matrix. Listen closely to the final blueprint. How do you overcome the primal fear of conflict? You have to break the biological code immediately. You must forcefully stop using highly weaponized therapy buzzwords to justify your chronic lack of courage. Stop telling your peers that you are protecting your energy when the dark, uncomfortable truth is that you are simply terrified of being disliked, judged, or intellectually challenged by another human being. Authentic human connection, true respect, and absolute power are inherently messy, emotionally draining, and dangerously unpredictable. That is the necessary, non-negotiable price of admission to a meaningful, high-status life. If you want to develop impenetrable psychological resilience and command respect, you must willingly step back into the arena of conflict. You must let people challenge you, you must endure the agonizing friction of disagreement, and you must rapidly learn to regulate your nervous system in the direct presence of a threat, not in the artificial, sterile absence of it. You need to start exposing yourself to microdoses of social discomfort immediately. This is the clinical application of exposure therapy. The next time a conversation gets tense or someone disrespects you, do not look for the exit. Force your feet to remain planted on the floor. Force your eyes to maintain heavy, unblinking contact. Notice the massive spike of adrenaline in your chest, the heat in your face, and the primal urge to retreat, and simply let it exist without reacting to it. Stay in the fire. Speak your truth slowly, clearly, and without a single apology. This is how you rebuild the neural pathways of dominance. You train your amygdala that social friction does not equal physical death. You teach your nervous system that you are a competent, dangerous adult who can handle the heat without collapsing. This is the only legitimate path to true emotional intelligence and social power. Anything else is just a highly marketable delusion sold to you by people who want to keep you weak, agreeable, and easily controlled. The psychological prison of avoidance is absolutely real, but now you possess the exact clinical blueprint to dismantle its walls, brick by brick. You are no longer blind to your own biological cowardice, which means you no longer have any excuse to remain a voluntary victim of your own fear. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to master your primal psychology before the covert manipulators in your circle use your remaining behavioral blind spots to completely destroy you. Check the resources in the description to actively rebuild your cognitive framework from the ground up and start operating like the top 1% of human behavior experts. Stop lying to yourself about your boundaries. You are not protecting your peace, you are running away from the very friction required to forge your strength. It is time to step into the fire, embrace the conflict, and reclaim your biological dominance.